This begins a series of looks into the large and complex narrative of the Warhammer 40,000 franchise. We will begin with this series by taking a look at the Imperium of Mankind. We start with the Imperium of Mankind for a number of reasons. Firstly, does the Imperium of Mankind represent humanity within the narrative, and as a result, it's easier to explain without further context. Secondly, does they take part in or work as a point of reference in most of the other franchises' narratives? Lastly, that the Imperium of Mankind have by far the most materials written about it. In the first part of this series, we will discuss how we can find similarities between the Imperium of Mankind and the colonial Great Britain. More specifically, how both cultures exhibit traits of colonialism and nationalism. The Imperium of Mankind can be seen as a glorification as well as a criticism of these concepts. The Imperium describes itself as the universe's sole and rightful ruler. Itself is ruled in theory by the Emperor, a glorified corpse of a man, kept in semi-life by the sacrifice of millions' lives. In reality, an unimaginably large governmental body of scribes, bureaucrats and rule-makers and statesmen rules in its stead. This organization, just like colonial Britain, is centrally ruled. In the case of the Imperium of Mankind, the central entity is known as High Lord of Terra. In reality, both empires were in fact quite decentralized, due to the distance between the seat of power and her colonies. Greater decisions, and of course, the collection of taxes was still left to the central power. The biggest difference between the two empires being the mind-bogglingly large scale of the Imperium of Mankind. Despite the long distances and independent rule of the colonies, thus every planet and space station under mankind control have an obligation to pay a large amount of taxes to Terra. These civilizations and communities were also expected to stay true to the true imperial values and customs. This again can be linked to how the Great Britain ruled their colonies. It is said that amongst all of the colonial powers, Great Britain was most eager to spread their culture to the colonies. For example, did they start cricket leagues in several of the colonies for this purpose. And it said while Germany built railroads, Brits made horse racing tracks. Likewise does the Imperium of Mankind bring both creed, customs and religion to each planet they either colonize or recapture. Like their colonial counterparts, thus some cultures and people encountered become what is called sanctioned aliens, and are allowed to continue existent. Many others were simply destroyed. To further cement allegory to the British colonies are the fact that the rulers of imperial planets was named planetary governors, not unlike the title colonial governor given to the ruler of British colonies. Next is the most controversial and difficult topic in this comparison, how the Imperium of Mankind see the other and how this compares to the real-life contemporaries. The British Empire, as well as other contemporary colonial powers, have a well-documented bloody history with what they saw as the local savage. The natives were never met in equal terms, always seen as the lesser. To further understand how the British colonial powers saw the other, we must first discuss how it saw itself. The British Empire is always described as cultivated, intelligent, mature and masculine. In comparison, the others were seen as lesser, savage, childish and feminine. As you can see, does the British Empire need others to define itself as superior. The Imperium of Mankind follows a similar ideology, only expanded on a galactic scale, and not against just humans, but different sentient species as well. The Imperium of Mankind has several others to prove itself superior than. Alien species, heretics, and mutants can always be used to prove this superiority. The virtues differ slightly between the two empires, but some, such as strength, civilization, and purity, seem to exist within both cultures. Lastly, I will discuss how the two colonial powers justify their conquest and exterminations. Part of the strategy of colonial England was to paint the colonization efforts as a great adventure, with great men went on journeys and great discoveries, slaying monsters, and hopefully, for the rulers, died heroic deaths somewhere. The actual reasons can be narrowed down to economical and political reasons, as well as the need to so-called educate and help the local population. In Warhammer universe, there are similar comparisons to the Wanderlust in the organization called Rogue Traders, which we will discuss in a later chapter. The Imperium of Mankind, on the other hand, described to follow a sort of divine plan. It was the will of the Imperial God Emperor that humanity will rule the stars, and as the gods command, so shall it be. In other words, a little form of divine destiny. In conclusion, we can see several ties between the fictional Imperium of Mankind and the real colonial powers, and Britain in particular. This chapter has been but a small taste on further discussion in order to familiarize the reader with my arguments and the topics we will discuss. Next chapter we will dive into how the Imperium's aesthetics is presented and what that can say about the narrative at large.